Getting off the ground at Medina.
Have you settled in Medina now?
Oh yes, now we've settled.
so you know where to buy cocoa, and you know where to buy everything in there.
The wachi there.
Oh, that's right.
I need to find the wachi joint.
If you didn't know about it, well, Medicas Hospital has opened a new branch in Medina Firestone, just behind the SGSSD. Yeah, I've been there a couple of times already with my sick self. and I've been sorted. See, I've been sorted. Hallelujah. Okay, so we did mention from the beginning of this month that we'll share some education on childhood cancers. Well, this afternoon, our focus will be on leukemia. Leukemia. We'll understand what leukemia is all about and how it affects children and teenagers. Now, the causes, if there are known ones, symptoms, effects, and treatment. And I'm also interested in finding out if it can be prevented.
Right.
Now, childhood leukemia, I understand, is one of the most common types of cancer in children and teens, and is a cancer of the white blood cells, abnormal white blood cells that form in the bone marrow. It all is a lot of,
technical stuff.
Yeah. Doc, let's have a conversation about it. And if you have any questions for the Drive Doctor on this, please send me a WhatsApp message 0244 340 437. Doc.
Right. So, beginning of the month, we mentioned that September is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month.
Yeah.
So we're going to focus the conversation on childhood cancer. Most of the time, we all fall into that trap when we think about children. We assume they are healthy individuals and they've got their whole lives in front of them. And if they're going to get sick, it's maybe they suffered a fall at home and they broke an arm or had a cut, and they will send them to the hospital and then they'll be fine. But unfortunately, children also suffer almost the same range of medical, illness that adults are afflicted with. Unfortunately, children also suffer cancer. Children also don't have a voice most of the time, especially in our part of the world. We'll say, so children globally, need advocates and parents and then guardians, teachers, and adults in every community are supposed to be advocates for children. So it's very important that we talk about this particular problem in children. Globally, Lexus, 300,000 children, are diagnosed with cancer every year. In Ghana, we estimate that 1 in 500 children will be affected by age 15. And if you look at our population at the last census of 24 million, then we expect about 1,000 children below the age of 15 to be diagnosed every year. Unfortunately, only about 20% of 20 to 30% of children with cancer in our part of the world receive treatment. That's very sad. And also, again, in Ghana, the only 2 hospitals that have a comprehensive pediatric cancer or childhood cancer, treatment units. So it's the statistics are a bit bleak. But I would say that most of the cancers that we deal with in our part of the world are treatable if detected early. So today the conversation is going to be about the second most common, or one of the top 3 cancers we see in our country, and it is leukemia. Most people would have heard about leukemia because of the work done by a gentleman called Danny White.
Yeah, Danny White of blessed memory.
Yes, he passed away a couple of years back, but he brought so much attention to leukemia. So before I try or attempt a definition, let's do a little bit of biology. This one is GHS 1. Biology
better.
So that Alexis, you can
I can sit in this class.
Right. So our blood contains 3 main cell types. So when we talk about blood, we've got the liquid part and then we've got the cellular part, the cells. The 3 main cell types are the red blood cells, which are responsible for carrying oxygen around the body.
The white blood cells.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
You remember. Which are responsible for defense against infections.
Right.
So they defend us against infections. And then the last one, we call them the platelets.
No, I was not in class.
Yes. Platelets, they prevent excessive bleeding through clot formation.
Okay.
So when we bleed, it doesn't take long, and then usually the bleeding will stop. It is because you have these things we call platelets.
Okay.
So these are the three main cell types that we have in our blood. Leukemia refers to a group of cancers of the blood and bone marrow. When we talk about the bone marrow, that brownish, semi-solid thing that you find in bone. In Black Africa, we crack bones, we break bones when we eat. They will look at you some way.
So that little thing that runs through the middle.
That runs through the middle, and then you want to suck it out when you crack the bone. Is the bone marrow. So leukemia refers to cancer of the blood and bone marrow, and it primarily affects the white blood cells.
Okay.
So of the three cell lines, leukemia is affecting the white blood cell line. I'm saying primarily because in this type of leukemia, or I should say the commonest type, I'm saying it's a group of cancers. So there are different types.
Okay.
So leukemia is not a single entity.
Okay.
There are different types. In children, the commonest type is something we call ALL. ALL. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. So ALL for short. That's the commonest type. And in this type of leukemia, your body is producing, or your bone marrow, which is the site of production of the white blood cells or the blood cells, is producing a lot of immature, dysfunctional white blood cells. So we are supposed to produce white blood cells which defend your body, but you're supposed to produce a certain number. If you produce too much of it, then it is not good. But most importantly, the cells are immature. So because they are immature, they are not able to do the work that they would ordinarily do in the body. I also mentioned that leukemia primarily affects the white blood cells, but it also can lead to inadequate amounts of the red blood cells and the platelets. Why? They all occupy the same space. So you are producing red blood cells, you are producing platelets, and it's all occupying the same space. Then all of a sudden, you start producing way too many white blood cells, clogging up the space such that the red blood cells don't have enough space to occupy, and the platelets also don't have enough space to occupy. So this is what we mean by leukemia, or the ALL type of leukemia, which we find mainly in children.
How common is this in this part of our world?
Well, it is. You find of the different cancers that we have, it forms between 20 to 30%. Of the cases that we are seeing, or we are saying that it's in the top three. The other one is the lymphoma. Okay. In America and other parts of Europe, the leukemias are actually number one. Then you have the lymphomas number two, and so. But in Ghana, it is number two in terms of the childhood cancers.
Okay, so what are some of the symptoms associated with it?
Right. So the symptoms are not directly specific. I mean, we can't see one particular thing and say, oh, okay, if you are having this particular symptom, then it means you have a leukemia. But it's an aggregate of symptoms that we put everything together, and then we would run some tests, and then we would confirm it. So the first thing I want to talk about is a fever. Alexis, most of the time when people come to us and then they say they have a fever, they have their own layman's definition of a fever, or the Ghanaian's definition of a fever. Or say, me junsa a yellow. Doctor, me fever, me junsa a yellow. Well, no, a fever is an elevated body temperature. That is what we mean.
Anti-yellow one, then.
That one is the Ghanaian definition. So I guess every part of the country I have worked in, Accra, Temba, Agogo, everywhere I go, they tell them just say yellow, it's fever. So I want to take this opportunity to correct that. So okay. A fever is an elevated body temperature. I always advise every mother to have a thermometer at home. These days we've got the digital thermometers, so you put it there in the armpit, and then it beeps after a minute or two. And then you look at the temperature. If the temperature is above 37.5 degrees Celsius, then we would say you have a fever.
Okay.
So persistent fever that is not resolving can be a sign, because these individuals, because their white blood cells are no longer functional and enough, then they are susceptible to infections. And if you have an infection, then your body temperature tends to go up. The second thing is anemia, meaning you don't have enough blood. Remember I mentioned that although this disease is not directly affecting the red blood cells, which are responsible for carrying blood around your body. So if you don't have, your HB is low, your hemoglobin, which is found inside of the red blood cells, then we say you are anemic. We look under your eyes or something, then we see that it's pale, it's white, your fingernails look white, your tongue looks white. So when somebody is anemic or a child is anemic, the child fatigues easily. Children are usually playing around, running around the whole place. But if a child fatigues easily, then you suspect that the child is anemic, experiences dizziness, and also an awareness of their own heartbeat. These are all signs of anemia. The third symptom is bleeding from the gums or bleeding generally. So usually we all bleed a little bit. If you are using the wrong type of toothbrush, hard bristles, then you bleed a little. But if you realize that without much trauma, the child bleeds from the gums, the child will bleed from the nose, or the child bleeds into the skin. Most people wonder how they're able to detect that. Well, like this, if you realize well circumscribed patches, dark patches on the skin, it is evidence of bleeding into the skin. So bleeding from the gums, bleeding from the nose without any trauma should get every patient concerned. Bone pain. The child keeps coming to you and telling you, Mama, Dada, my thigh hurts, my arm hurts. You think, oh, you ran around, did you fall in school, and doesn't give you any history of trauma, then you should be worried. Again, fullness in the upper part of the abdomen, or we say the left upper abdomen. When the child tells you that they have this fullness, or the parent, you begin to see a distension, or there's something we call early satiety. Usually you eat about, a half a plate of rice before you feel full. But these days you realize that the child takes 1 or 2 spoons and then says, I don't want to have more, I'm full. That's what we mean by the early satiety.
Okay.
These are all symptoms. Sometimes they can also develop rashes on the skin. So if your child keeps having this persistent rashes, which won't go away, then it may be a sign. Because some of these leukemic cells, when they infiltrate the skin, it leads to the development of rashes. So we put all of these symptoms together, and when you visit your GP with these symptoms, it should trigger an investigation into a possible leukemia.
Are people born with it, or should I say, what even causes it? Because Green in Bokobi, Green just sends in a message and says, in Sotum, okay, Green is in Sotum. He says, Lexus, leukemia is a type of cancer of the blood-forming tissue. Can it be caused by too much meat in your diet?
Well, so far, no. In terms of the cause, when it comes to cancer, the jury is still out. We're still doing a lot of work, research work in that area. But there are two main things: genetic factors or mutations. When we say mutations, we are talking about an alteration in the code of certain genes. All right.
I think you mentioned it the other time.
Exactly. And some of the things that causes these genetic mutations can be exposure to radiation. So again, we are very cautious when, for example, pregnant women, need to take x-rays for one reason or the other. We make sure, if it's absolutely necessary, then we'll make sure that we'll drape them with what we call a lead apron. But most of the time we will not even ask them to do a chest x-ray. Radiation from other things. Now these days they've talked about microwaves, not being in the direct line of contact with microwaves. For example, not being so close to radio waves of a certain intensity. So radiation generally, sometimes accidents do happen near these nuclear plants. So sometimes when we hear about encroachment happening at around Kwabenya, Ghana Atomic Energy, and people are fighting, to get the lands around those places, it may not be entirely safe, because accidents can happen at some of these very sensitive installations or nuclear plants. And when they are emitting the radiations, you can't see it.
What about the telecom masts and those things?
Exactly. So those things produce radio waves, and they must be of a certain frequency. If they go beyond a certain frequency or of a certain intensity over a period, the jury is still out, but there are suspicions that generally radiations can be the reason why you experience some genetic mutations. So for leukemia, we believe that some of these genetic aberrations happen during pregnancy, and then they become manifest, when the child is born. The other important thing is exposure to infection, especially when it comes to this childhood leukemia. And it's very interesting. We've talked about lack of exposure to germs, especially in the first few weeks or months in life, as being a factor. That is not the exposure, the lack of exposure to germs in the first few weeks and early months of the child's life. Why is this important? Well, when you're exposed to germs, it primes your immune system. That's what we do. We try and model the same thing when we vaccinate children, or when we ask mothers to bring their newborns, for us to vaccinate them. We put a weakened germ or a killed germ into the body and gets to prime your immune system and stimulate your immune system to produce antibodies, those protective things.
Yeah.
Some people are zealous when it comes to hygiene. Too much of it is not good. Yes. Allow the child to be on the floor, to crawl, to pick something from the floor and put in their mouth, It helps. So when it comes to leukemia, acute ALL, we believe that triggering system, the lack of exposure to germs in the first few weeks, causes a poorly regulated immune system, and together with the genetic mutations that happen, contribute to the development of leukemia. So of course, I'm not saying that, come on, have no sense of hygiene and just expose your child, but the everyday things, you shouldn't be too be a zealot when it comes to hygiene.
Wow, this is quite interesting. I don't know if you have any questions for the Drive Doctor. You can WhatsApp us 0244340437. I don't know what treatment is out there.
Right. So
I remember in the case of Danny White,
I
remember there was a big campaign about looking for a bone marrow transplant, something of the sort. And they were looking for a match all over the world, and we're not getting a match and whatnot. So really, how do we treat it?
Well, with every cancer condition, it's difficult. So we talk about treatment most of the time, and for cancer, then the term we use is remission. So most, including ALL, are treatable. We talk about survival rates and so on and so forth. Early detection, is very important, and that is the barrier or the main challenge that we have in our part of the world. We have our own sociocultural limitations that prevent parents or guardians from sending children who are ill to the hospital. And then again, when they get to the hospital, unfortunately, sometimes we, the healthcare workers, also drop the ball in terms of not recognizing, the early signs and symptoms. Then sometimes too, when we do, then the actual diagnostic capability doesn't exist. You have to take a blood sample, and you need to send it to a lab that has a trained type of a special type of pathologist we call a hematologist, to look at it and give you a specific diagnosis. So the HR capability might not be there. But if we are able to do all of these things, then the mainstay of treatment is chemotherapy, where we give the children very strong medications. It is expensive, and sometimes people drop out of the treatment. And that is why last 2 weeks they launched that foundation to try and raise funds for parents and families who have children who suffer from cancer, so that they can stay in the treatment and we improve the quality of life. So I'd say that your general practitioner is key in the initial identification, of the disease. In Ghana at the moment, the Kolebu Teaching Hospital and then the Komfanochi Teaching Hospital are the two institutions that have a fully equipped pediatric oncology or cancer units. And once they get to receive the patients early enough, then they're able to offer treatment.
All right, you can give us a call, 0302216541. If you have questions for the Drive Doctor, you can send us a WhatsApp on 0244 340 437. This one says Lexus. It's a joy listening to the Drive Doctor and his nurse, Lexus. nurse Lexus.
You dropped out of medical school.
Please, listen. My mission is to become a doctor. That's what my father wanted. Let me get closer, not nurse. Leukemia, something not to even wish your enemy to have. One, can it be genetic, Makosby? I think you mentioned that earlier.
So there are a lot of genetic influences, and then sometimes there are some other genetic conditions. For example, Down syndrome, which is a condition where you have an extra copy of a particular chromosome called chromosome 21. You know, you have a third copy. Everybody's supposed to have 2 copies, and then you have a third copy. People have certain genetic conditions that predisposes them, for example, to developing this type of leukemia and others as well. So there is a lot of genetics involved, although the understanding is not quite clear.
Okay, since the focus was on childhood cancer, maybe you could share with us some of the early warning symptoms as well.
Right. So again, some of the take-home points, because I don't know whether next week or so would have the opportunity, but the presentation of cancer in children will frequently mimic other, childhood illness. So these are some of the guidelines. If you find lumps, any lumps, bumps in the abdomen, in the head, or on the head, on the neck, and in the armpit or the groin, please have it checked out. So lumps in the abdomen, lumps on the scalp, lumps in the neck, and then in the armpit. Again, any unexplained weight loss in your child. Children are supposed to gain weight and grow. So any unexplained weight loss, unexplained bleeding tendencies, or fatigue, any aches in the bones, any unusual fractures. What am I saying unusual fractures? Well, your bones are generally very strong, so we expect a fracture only to happen with considerable trauma. So you go and play football and then you get a very bad tackle or you fall from a height. But if very mild circumstances, cause a fracture, then you should be worried.
Okay.
Poor eyesight. Sometimes, you realize that your child keeps running into things. It should be cause for concern. Your child keeps bringing homework, and it is wrongly written out. Then your teacher tells you that, but I keep writing the thing on the board. Why is the child not writing them out well? Well, it is not because the child is daft, but probably because the child is not seeing properly.
Okay.
So poor eyesight. Then I also mentioned squint. Squints usually is when the child, you're looking at me, but then your eye seems to be at a different angle.
Right.
So you think the person is looking in a different direction, but it's looking, right at you. So that's what we call squint. Then if you notice also any unusual gait, walk, unusual balance, and then persistent headaches. These are early warning signs, and you should talk to your doctor, to get your child checked out.
Kweku in Akropong, says Lexus, there's this assumption out there that if you live in a smoke endemic area and under high tension areas, you could get leukemia. Please ask Doc how authentic it is.
Well, I don't know about the smoke. It's not one of those things that has come up yet. But these days, there's a lot of work going on about, safe air, smog, and all of that polluted air pollution. It's big. It's causing a lot of different things. So I wouldn't be surprised that down the line we would find out that it is responsible, for causing not just leukemia but other types of cancer. The high tension cables. I mentioned that element of radiation, which cuts across board different types of radiation. So again, we don't have firm scientific evidence, but it is one of those things that it's of concern.
Okay, so K in the US says like crawling kids should taste in cocoa. Ew.
Yeah. Yes, I think it's very.
But we chop some. We chop some.
Yeah. So let them play around.
It says how safe is microwave food, because that helps us a lot here. He's in the USA.
Right. So once we talk about the food itself, I don't think there's any evidence about the food itself. But now I've read a few material that talks about being in the direct line of the microwave. So they talk about not looking into the microwave or standing right in front of it once you turn it on. Yes, because exposure to microwave. So microwave is a type of radiation of a certain frequency, so it's been fingered as well in its causation. So we don't want you to stand in the direct line, or look into the microwave oven, when it is on. But the food itself, if it is in a microwavable container, shouldn't cause much of a problem.
Awesome. Good stuff from the Drive Doctor, Dr. Yao Safo. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. We can't take more of your questions and calls. So, Doc, let's leave your contact with my friend who is listening now, so that they can call you.
So, those who want to reach us, the phone number is 0501 477 340. 0501 477 340. And we'd always continue the conversation on our Facebook page. So those who want to read more can follow us, Medicas Hospital. That's our Facebook page. And
find Medicas Hospital in Medina behind the SGSSB at Firestone.
Right.
Dr. Safo, thank you.
You're welcome.
And we're walking next week.
Yes.
Next
week we are on.
The Medicas team are going to set up and do free health screening again on World Heart Day.
Exactly.
So if you have a broken heart, if you want to, you want to check your heart and whatnot, blood sugar level and cholesterol and whatnot.
The prices will also be there, so they should read up.
Yes. Read about it, because there'll be lots of prizes from the team at Medicas on the day. So it's 29th of September at Ayimensa to Pediatric GHS. That's where we would end. If you take the lead, wait for us, because we walk slow. Thank you, Dr. Safo.
You're welcome.
It's 5 o'clock. Stay tuned into Joy FM.